Today I'd like to start by defining evolution before we get into the different arguments. A dictionary definition of it says, the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth. But a much simpler description of it that is used by evolutionary scientists is adaptation over time through changes that were caused by mutations and environmental pressure. So the main idea is that you have this group of organisms, a population. So already we're dealing with large numbers of creatures. And so their average change over a period of time. In very high-stress situations, evolution can happen in a matter of only a few generations. But most studies of evolution are talking on the grand scheme, so millions to billions of years. That amount of time is kind of difficult to wrap our head around. And like I said, sometimes evolution can happen faster than that. And there are lots of modern-day examples to show it. One that comes to mind is MRSA. This is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. To break that down, that means it is a type of bacteria that is unfazed by a certain type of antibiotic. Although it had been around for years, staph was first discovered in the 1880s. It caused anything from rashes to food poisoning to death. But then, in the 1940s, less than 100 years ago, this new type of treatment called antibiotics was created, and it was used and was very effective on staph as well as some other common bacterial infections. From the very beginning, unfortunately, this new drug was misused and overused, and it caused a huge stress on the environment of the bacteria, and so they quickly adapted in order to survive. Within 10 years, the bacteria evolved and was resistant to penicillin, so doctors switched to methicillin. But it only took about 10 more years before scientists found the first strands resistant to that drug. In just 10 years, this type of bacteria was able to mutate in order to survive. Now that's thousands of generations for a bacteria, but it's not a lot of time for us to see a very clear example of evolution. So just from things happening in our world today, we know that evolution is a real thing, but figuring out the paths that evolution took throughout the last few billions of years is another mystery altogether. And that is where fossils come in. Now that we know evolution happens, we can look at fossils from organisms of the past to understand how things evolved over all of that time. Something that can be difficult to understand when it comes to fossils is how we can know how old they are. Well, just like we use a clock to tell time, scientists have their own versions of clocks. If we were to try to understand billions of years by counting single seconds, our numbers would be huge. So we need clocks that have ticks that are much longer than a single second. Two main types of clocks are carbon dating and genetic dating. Now, carbon dating looks at the elements and the materials and the soil around the fossils to find the age, while genetic dating looks at the time it takes for DNA to change among populations. Both of these are used all the time. So by using these clocks, and thanks to the large number of fossils that we have found to date, we now have a fairly good idea of the path evolution took. It definitely wasn't a straight path, but every day we are discovering new fossils that help us more accurately describe what has been coined the tree of life. Based on discoveries, there are a few big general claims that can be said about this path. Sometime since the world began 4.5 billion years ago, the inorganic matter of this world combined and changed and made organic matter. Then somewhere close to 3.5 billion years ago, that organic matter combined into the first living cell. These single-celled organisms were the only living thing on the planet for millions of years as they slowly evolved into multicellular organisms, which evolved into plants and animals. Then some plants and animals began to live on land and adapt, and around 230 million years ago, we had our first mammals. As these different types of organisms spread all over the globe, they diversified and changed, becoming the amazing variety of bacteria and plants and animals that we see today. That diversification includes the emergence of Homo sapiens around 300,000 years ago. This is what we today classify as human. But I'm going to stop here because this is where many people get tied up and can't wrap their head around these ideas. Now, evolution can be a difficult concept, but why, when we start talking about human evolution and the ancestors we evolved from, do many begin to become skeptical of the entire idea of evolution? A lot of this dissent comes from a single verse in Genesis that says, God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. This one line is different than the rest of the Judeo-Christian creation story because it sets humans apart as special. But what do the words "in his image" really mean? Does it mean that our physical bodies couldn't have evolved from another creature? Not necessarily. As St. Thomas Aquinas wrote, the image of God always abides in the soul. This quote is based on the Catholic teaching on the creation of humans, which requires us to believe two main points. The first is that at some point God instantaneously put souls into two beings. This doesn't say how their physical forms were created, and we as humans shouldn't put limits on how God did or didn't create the first humans, through evolution or molding them out of clay. But it's important to keep in mind that God often works within the bounds of nature. The second main point is that there was an initial fall, what we call original sin, and what Genesis describes as the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. The Catholic Church believes that those first two people with human souls acted freely in order to sin for the first time, which changed the course of human history forever. This point has been one that has prevented people from believing in evolution for years, partially due to a single quote from Pope Pius XII. Now, it is in no way apparent how such an opinion can be reconciled with that which the sources of revealed truth and the documents of the teaching authority of the Church propose with regard to original sin, which proceeds from a sin actually committed by an individual Adam and which, through generations, is passed on to all and is in everyone as his own. This quote has often been misused and taken out of context, but Pope Pius XII was a smart man, and he chose his language carefully. He said, "It is not apparent how it happened." He doesn't say that it didn't happen this way. But to his point, I think there are two main reasons to why it's not as apparent as we would like it to be. The first is that, as I said at the very beginning of this talk, evolutionary science studies populations. It is near impossible to find the very first single Homo sapien and date it and say, this is where the transition happened. The second point is that science can tell us about Homo sapiens, a classification that we as humans coined, but we don't know what God classifies as humans. Many other species of the genus Homo were very similar to us, but there have also been very distinct differences in the history of Homo sapiens. There might have been some point along there that God deemed the beginning of man. These are things that we can't know through science. We can classify in human terms, but not in God's terms. So, to close, evolution is a real process that happens every day, all around us. And it's been happening for billions of years, and it has led to the amazingly diverse world that we live in. The Catholic Church does not see anything inherently wrong in these teachings as long as we acknowledge that at some point in history, God instantaneously put human souls into two beings to start the human race, and that those two humans caused original sin. There is still so much to learn about the history of this planet, but I see each new discovery as a better understanding of my God and how he created it all. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Leave a comment if there's any particular topic that you would like me to cover. If you just want more information of the day-to-day interactions between faith and science, head over to my website at www.catechistscientist.com to read my blog and for links to my social media. On both Instagram and Twitter, you can find me at IST2. If you like this content and would like to help keep it going, please head over to patreon.com/IST2 and help fund this new and exciting enterprise. Thanks!